Life on the Field by Nick Marfangeli. Nick tucked in his red mesh game jersey with Salem on the front and 52 on the back as he bent down onto his right knee. He loved that jersey, despite the damage he inflicted upon it. The shoulder pads pierced through the sides, while the bottom was stretched beyond the original seam. As he knelt, a football was tossed to him, while a shiny helmet with a plastic face mask sat in front of him. He hated being in the picture with that helmet. "That's not a football player's helmet," he said in his mind. You see, on the first day of getting pads for Salem Pop Warner, the helmets are given out first. Helmets were a big status symbol. While quarterbacks and running backs would get their Deion Sanders, as it was called, face mask, Nick would get his own special linebacker face mask that his coach Higley gave him every year. It was nearly 3 pounds heavier than every other mask, and made out of metal with a thin hockey puck-like rubber covering it. But it was fading. Plastic face masks were given to new players and kids that didn't know any better. Nick hated being with that damn helmet. The photographer snapped the shot twice while holding the football tucked between his inner forearms and ribs. He did not smile. The tough guy persona was on. It did not turn off until the end of game day. Nick's father was a gritty, hard-working type. Being a former Special Forces Marine, Tony, Nick's father, was one who appreciated any type of toughness in life, especially in sports. Tony's personal philosophy with regards to life was quite simple. Put your head down, keep your legs moving. Mr. Marfangeli picked this line up from an old Saul-type like coach back in his high school football days and says that it's helped him out through football, patrols in the jungle, and even his current job as a firefighter. This philosophy was ingrained in Nick's DNA. This type of teaching in sports Mr. Marfangeli gave out enabled his son, Nick, to become obsessed with being the toughest 11-year-old on the football field. Nick, whether in a game or practice, always hit as hard as he could and never let a player keep him down after a tackle. After he got tackled, Nick would get up before the last person on the pile, as if the tackle never happened. It was all about his toughness. His toughness was tested with each football game in practice. Nick loved being tested. Nick idealized players like Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher because of Jamie, Nick's uncle. Jamie would always talk about football with Nick, regardless of what season it was. Jamie was a real deal in football. In high school, he got tons of attention from big-time football schools because of his skills as a linebacker. If it wasn't for his attitude towards authority in those days, Jamie would have been playing Division I football and probably would not be as obsessed with football as he is nowadays. With other relatives like Jamie, Kevin, Mike, and Tommy, all athletic uncles, Nick would always have something to talk about with his adult family members. He was the only child out of all his cousins that played football, and this made him feel like he could really relate to his uncles better than his cousins Wesley and Sean could. Nick didn't feel the uncles liked him better, but that he could just talk to them about better things. Football. It was as if football was the primary bond between him and his family. After Nick turned 12 and the new football season approached, he picked up a new sport. The sport was brand new to Salem, but a couple of his friends were trying it, so he figured he'd give it a shot. Nick had only heard of lacrosse a couple times before he suited up for the first practice, but after the youthful and passionate coach had shown him a video of Navy vs. Virginia collegiate game, Nick was hooked. Nick played wall ball constantly as his coach told him to in order to get better at his stick skills. As summer went on, Nick knew that football was still his first sport, but lacrosse was taking its place for the moment. Lacrosse ended and football was in session. Nick was ecstatic. He had not heard much about the coach of the A squad, which was the team for 12 and 13-year-olds, but that this year was the year where it becomes most competitive. Again, Nick lived for the competition, and he was not going to back down from it. Nick did his usual routine in practice, always hitting as hard as possible but never showing it. Nick never yelled or made sounds. His father told him making scenes like that, it's all bullshit. One practice in late September, during a tackling drill, Nick got screamed at by his young and out-of-shape coach. While going one-on-one with the quarterback, Antonio, Nick connected his helmet onto Antonio's and drove up, making Antonio shoot back and onto his back. It felt like a great hit, and sounded like a great hit. Nick exerted all his force onto Antonio and made the type of hits you see in the highlight tapes or ESPN. Nick jogged back into line while Antonio slowly got up. Nick already had some conflicts with the coach for various reasons, but now that Nick had given his favorite player a concussion, coach lost it. After Nick experienced the verbal abuse by his coach, he looked at football in a very different way. While running laps as punishment for the hit, Nick thought of the differences between football and lacrosse. There was no prima donnas on the lacrosse field, like football, where the quarterback must be protected. Lacrosse has a much more relaxed flow than football. Nick wanted to be allowed to go as hard as he could, and he began to realize that lacrosse was a window in which to do so. Despite these sudden feelings of angst towards football, Nick never considered quitting the sport. You can't let some knucklehead ruin it for you. Mr. Marfangeli